you everyone for joining. We really appreciate you coming tonight. This is the start of a new series of lectures for us. If you know BitTiger well, you know we really specialize in technical education and mostly in helping people develop a better technical career. And a big piece of that is not just the technical skills, but the soft skills and the career development skills that you need to pass through the interview process, to network, to even figure out what the right career path is. And this new series of lectures is where we're inviting industry experts that work in the recruiting industry and in the tech industry in general to give us their perspective on how new graduates especially should prepare for the job search process. So today we're honored to have Rob come speak with us. Rob has deep experience, over 7 years of technical recruiting experience. He's worked across a variety of industries like financial and healthcare industries, and most recently has deep experience in the tech industry, working at companies I'm sure you've heard of like Twitter, Amazon, and Google. And today he's specifically covering the topic of networking. And we think this is really important for a couple of reasons. One is a lot of students will always ask us how to figure out how to find referral opportunities, which could be a great way to get your foot in the door. And then also just to figure out maybe some information that might not be as obvious out there. Some people might not know what exact teams have positions that are open, or what's the best way to phrase things when you get into an interview. There are lots of benefits that come from networking, and Rob has put together this presentation to give you his perspective from a technical recruiter. So I'm going to hand it over to Rob now, and I'll let you get started.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, definitely appreciate the opportunity to come and speak with you, and hopefully we can all learn together and share any thoughts that you have or any questions. And like Mike said, I've been doing technical recruiting for about 7 years. I actually got my start as a career counselor doing one-on-one counseling for people who were looking for a job. So this is definitely something that I'm very passionate about, and definitely excited to talk to you a little bit about networking and how it can help you in terms of finding the opportunity that you're looking for. So I'll go ahead and get into it. I want to definitely save some time for some Q&A, and we've got some hands-on activities to get into as well. So I will go ahead and get that going now. Okay, great. So this is networking with technical talent. I come from the technical field or the background, and so we will talk definitely in terms of networking and how it applies more directly in terms of technical opportunities and networking with technical technical individuals. To start out, I have an outline here, and I always like to start with the outline just to give you an idea of things we will discuss during the time that we have together. So to start out, we'll start with an intro. We'll talk briefly about what networking is, which I'm sure most of you are very familiar with, but we'll dig into that a little bit. We'll talk then about working and finding a mentor. We'll talk about the differences between having a mentor and networking, some of the similarities, and then some of the differences between the two. We'll talk about finding a good mentor, and then also some of the expectations that you should have when you do have the opportunity to have a mentor, and some of the expectations that they have for you. After which, we'll get into seeking contact information through LinkedIn and other resources. This is actually one of my personal favorites. As a recruiter, one of the things that I have the opportunity to do quite often is to look for people everywhere and anywhere in the open web. So I'll share some of the tools that recruiters use in finding people like yourself, and hopefully you can use the tools as well as you start to look for people in which you can network with, or even people that you can get in contact with, and just gather a little bit more information as you start and continue to make decisions on where you'd like to work, and how you'd like your career path to go. And then from there, we'll talk about conducting an informational interview, and also putting together a solid reach out in order to get more people to talk to as you start to network. And then lastly, we'll end with the elevator pitch. This is what some people refer to as their 20 to 30 second presentation. So this is something that you can utilize anywhere, and hopefully it'll be another tool that you can use as you start to network and continue to network with people. So let's talk about networking in its very basic definition. So networking is the deliberate activity to build, reinforce, and maintain relationships of trust with other people to further your goals. Now, there's a couple things that I like in this definition, and I've underlined a couple of those. So one, we have deliberate, we have activity, and we have relationships of trust. I would probably secondarily highlight build, reinforce, and maintain as well. So those are all important factors that go into it. The reason I like deliberate and activity is because when you're networking, it really is a proactive activity that you're doing. And with that proactive activity, it also conveys to myself that one of the important pieces that you're going to want to have when networking is having a solid plan as well. So in networking, and we'll get through this as well, one of the things that you're going to want to do is have a purpose as you're networking. So it starts by having an end in mind, and then working through those steps incrementally until you get what you're looking for. And then a integral part behind networking as well is building those relationships of trust. So when you network and you build relationships of trust, it's more than just handing people out a business card, but it's trying to figure out a way to get people to remember you. I had the opportunity to speak with somebody just recently, I think it was a couple of days ago, that was looking for a recruiter. I currently wasn't open for a new opportunity, but automatically when they asked, who do I know that would be looking for an opportunity, I automatically thought of two people. And the reason that I thought of these two people is because these were people who I knew more on a personal level. So I built that relationship of trust. I know a lot of recruiters, but typically when asked a question, there's a couple people that come to mind. So what I hope to do throughout this presentation is to talk about ways in which you can get people to remember you as opportunities open up in their company, opportunities that you might be looking for, by doing things such as building that relationship of trust. So let's talk a little bit about benefits of networking. So first, networking encourages mentors. One of the things that you'll find out, and you could probably apply this to yourself personally, is that people love to share their knowledge. And so having someone as a mentor is an excellent way to be able to really put some value into people's experience so that they can share their knowledge with you. When you think of a mentor is best defined as an experienced and trusted advisor. So this is somebody who can not only advise, but they can also train. So I want you to keep that in mind as well, is that when you think of somebody as you're networking and you want someone to help you, and maybe just somebody that you can ask questions and give advice, I want you to think about these people as people who can actually help help to train you as you move forward in your career path. Another benefit to networking is understanding the market opportunities. When you reach out to people, and depending on the particular type of people you're reaching out to, they can give you a lot of information in terms of, one, the company that you're looking at, two, the culture of the company, and then three, just general insight regarding specific technologies that they're working with, and give you some additional advice as you move forward in your career. So like I mentioned here, they can give you insight about work-life balance, salaries, stability of a company, potential growth opportunities. I was thinking of an example, and I was thinking recently about some of the hurricanes that we've had across the nation, more particularly on the southern and the eastern coast. And I thought, if we want to know about hurricanes and hurricane patterns and models, who do we typically look to for information on that? And the thought immediately came to mind, we look at weathermen. So in a very similar case, if we want to learn information about things like data science, for example, who should we look to? Data scientists, of course. So second, benefits of networking would be helping to understand some of the market opportunities. Number three, networking also improves communication by understanding how people are talking about things. This can give you insight on how to communicate your experience on things such as a resume. As a recruiter, one of the things that we look at are what people are doing and how they are sharing their information. And typically as recruiters and not having as strong as a technical acumen as engineers and people in another field, typically we base a lot of what we look at through things like keywords. And so as you talk and start to network with people, you start to learn some of the keywords and some of the ways in which they phrase the type of work that they're doing. So pay attention to that. Take notes when you can, because they will be able to help you as you start to think about your resume and how is that reaching out to people, in hopes that it could potentially get you some additional eyes on your resume and get you some calls for interviews. Networking also helps you to make friends. We talked a little bit about building relationships of trust. This is vitally important because, like I mentioned before in my previous example, if there is an opportunity that comes up, typically who do people think about? They think about their friends. They think about people who they've built a relationship of trust with. And so vitally important to establish friends. You never know when somebody will come up with opportunity that you just might be looking. And so oftentimes those come through your friends. And then number 5, another benefit of networking is networking brings new ideas and innovations. And this gives you better insight into where to take your career. And it actually clears up a lot of preconceived assumptions. So I had a quick thought on this. And so to maybe give you an example, so maybe there's a company you've been really excited about in the past, that as you talk to somebody and start to network, you understand that the work culture is actually a little bit different than you had hoped for. I've had the opportunity to work at and to talk to people who talk a lot about things like 20% time and 20% time at Google. And what you'll find out as you start to talk to a lot of engineers is Google does have 20% time, but oftentimes there's not a lot of time to participate in that. And so as you talk to people, you really start to understand this is one of the things that this company brands itself by, but is this something that they really value, or is this more of an ideal culture? So networking brings new ideas and innovations. And then as you talk to people, one of the things that you'll start to learn is you'll start to discover patterns and see what people are valuing, what the market looks like. And for those of you who are really ambitious, this might help you in terms of having your own startup. So, and I don't know if this is a good time to see if there's any questions at all, or.
No questions yet. So you can keep going.
Okay, perfect. Okay, let's talk about some networking best practices. So typically you're going to want to network with individuals that have been on a similar career path. And what I would also say with this is you might want to find people who work on a similar career path, but then also as you think about your career, if there's a particular area that you're looking to go into, maybe look for people who've been in your current situation, and then that have moved one or two steps forward, who can really give you value as you have the opportunity to talk to them. And let's see. Another best practice is to create a personal message for individual reach outs. As a recruiter, one of the things that I get quite often are a lot of people who reach out to me through LinkedIn. And oftentimes these people obviously are looking for a new opportunity. But but sometimes their message is not as very personal, and I'm not sure what the application is or what direction they would like me to help them in terms of their career search. And then another networking best practice, and I had mentioned this before, is have an end in mind. What are you looking to achieve through networking? Are you trying to understand what the market looks like? Do you want to understand the company culture, etc.? There's several tools out there that can help you in terms of understanding things like culture, things like the market, even things like salary. Some really popular tools are obviously Glassdoor, which is very popular in terms of giving you ideas in terms of the companies that are out there, and what people who are working there actually think of the companies. They give you a really good idea in terms of benefits as well, and even some interview questions that you could potentially be asked going into an interview. Indeed is another way, and then you can also just do an open web search. Quora might be another option for you as well. I saw one hand raised, and I think I saw a question. Should we get into that quickly before we move to the next step?
So it's a little bit different topic. They're asking about how to write a good cover letter. So I know we do have, what we will have coming up is how to write a good networking message. So maybe let's go to that. If we have extra time at the end, we can go on the cover letter. But I think that's the relevant text that I think people should see is if you're going to reach out to people for networking, how do you write that first communication? Yeah.
And let me just give you just one thought on cover letters. It's been in the past where cover letters were actually very popular at one point in time. But what I found, and as I've gotten into recruiting more, is that cover letters are becoming a little bit more obsolete, where it's not really looked at quite as much. And especially the field that you're looking into, which is technical, like engineering and data scientists and things like that. Oftentimes people will really just share their information that's relevant on their resume. Because typically, when you have a cover letter, what people said in the past is the reason they have a cover letter is when you have two people who are equal in their experience, and sometimes the cover letter would serve as a way to decide who to pick over the other. That's not really the case that you'll find within this particular industry, and I've seen it really be a lot more obsolete in other other areas as well. So just wanted to share that a little bit on cover letters. But yeah, like Mike said, we'll get into a networking letter, which I think might hold a little more value. All right, so let's talk about some networking pitfalls. Part of this is not using the right tools, which may or may not be a particular something that you're familiar with or be an issue, or it could potentially be a challenge, but not that it's your fault. You just might not be familiar with certain processes within companies, and that's all right. But there are definitely different tools that you can use. So I wanted to talk really quick. Mike had kind of given me an idea of what the demographics look like with this group, and I know a lot of people who are recent graduates or are potentially still enrolled in a program and potentially are looking for internships, where some of you are just recently graduating. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the difference between a university recruiter and an industry recruiter, and just how it's different in a lot of the bigger companies. And I've seen this in companies I work with, such as Google. I've seen this at Amazon. I've seen this at Twitter. I've seen this currently at Redfin. So let me pull open the slide for you, and then we'll talk a little bit about that. Okay, so there's definitely a difference between university hiring and industry hiring. So university hiring is just as it sounds. This is typically recruiters who are working with people who are attending a university or are potentially just graduating from a university. So university teams are assigned to work with individuals looking for internships. University recruiting lasts from midsummer to early fall for following summer internships. So what that means is typically what happens is you'll have university recruiters who will do almost like a tour to different colleges, where they'll have sort of a job fair. And in this job fair, they'll speak with several individuals that are looking for internships. So typically what they do is they'll go kind of midsummer, so July into the early fall, September, October, and that's where they'll do the tour, and they will be hiring for the following summer. I've got something else that I can show you here, but let me talk about some of these other points. Depending on the company, you may be considered a university hire based on the graduation date. Google, I think you're still technically a university hire up until a year after you graduate. Amazon is 6 months, and there's some places that typically right after you graduate, you are considered an industry hire. I'll talk a little bit about industry hires. In fact, maybe that's a good segue right now. So industry hiring, if you look down at number 2, so industry hires start 6 months to a year, like I just mentioned. There's different levels for industry hires. Typically 1 to 3 years experience is where you'd be considered more of a junior engineer. 3 to 5 is more mid-level, and then 5 years plus is typically what you'd consider a senior level engineer. Companies usually have a cap on how many interns and junior level SDEs or software development engineers they can hire, whereas with industry, it's almost an ending number. So going back to the top, university recruits usually go through a more rigorous recruiting process. So if you are considered a university candidate, typically what will happen, because there's so many university candidates, are that you will go through a series of assessments, coding challenges in order to get to the point where you'll actually interview with the team. Part of that, unfortunately, is so that they can help weed out some of the competition for some of those internship opportunities. All right, so let me go to this really quick. I'm just going to go online. I want to show you this search. Now, search I put down here is I'll do company name, university, recruiting, and I'll show you how this works. Let's go to Google, or actually I'll do this. So for example, let's say you want to work at VMware. So you look at VMware, you'll do university, and you'll do recruiting. Okay, and typically most companies you put in here are going to have something almost at the top that's going to talk a little bit about this. So if you go to university and recent grads, you're going to see something like this. So if you are in the university and looking for an internship, or if you are a recent graduate, it may be worth your time to do a search like that, because most likely what this is going to tell you, if you look at recent graduates, when their opportunities start at in terms of timeline to be considered more of like industry, and then internships, they'll talk about how to get involved and how to apply. What I would recommend in either one of these cases, because oftentimes with these internships, what you're going to find is that when you apply for a internship, typically what happens is you'll go into this very large candidate pool, and I think it's better to definitely go through to somebody who is a university recruiter, because they will be able to give you a lot of you'll have more of a direct route to that role.
So there's quite a few questions built up now, so it might be a good time to pause.
Okay.
I'll just I'll filter through because there's quite a few right now. So one that I thought was really interesting is, and this is kind of this looks like after maybe you're in your internship, but do you make private friendships with coworkers when you're in business together, and is that a good networking strategy? I think this is like making friends with work people outside of a work context.
Yeah, I would say definitely. It's there's a lot of value that goes into having a good relationship, and I've seen quite a few people who the hiring manager will be really interested in the intern because they've been able to build rapport within that team and have been able to build a friendship. So definitely outside of work, inside of work, I think both plays to your favor.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, especially important for interns because not everyone will necessarily do a project with you in such a short time. So it's good to make an informal impression on them.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So this is another good one because you just talked about how it's good to go through the university recruiters rather than just do a resume drop. So someone asked, when you ask for an informational interview, the person asked me what I want to gain out of the conversation. Is it okay to be frank and say I'm looking for a job?
I see the thing about phrasing it like that is that is partly part of the reason that you are reaching out to them. You are looking for a job. You're looking for somebody with their particular background because you do admire them in some way. And so it is expected, but what they typically say with informational interviews is that it's not a good place to ask for a job because a couple of different reasons. One, they might not have responsibility over the hiring. That might go through a recruiter or somebody else on their team. Two, what I found is the best ways when you do reach out to people to set up an informational interview, one of the best ways to get people engaged is that you want to talk to them solely for an opportunity to learn about what they do. And so when you do talk about wanting to just get a job, or when they ask you what you want to do and get a job, it does kind of show that I think they assume that you are just using them to get to get a job. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. So, I mean, just to kind of summarize your point, it's about wanting to learn more about their position and the career path that's related to their company. And it's okay if your true purpose, and they probably know this, they know your true purpose is you're interested in figuring out job opportunities, but it just puts them in an uncomfortable position, or they're kind of just tired of those kind of requests. So it's best not to be so direct and ask that you just want to know about job opportunities, because that's so easy for them to just send you a link and say, well, if you want to know the job opportunities, why don't you look at our university recruiting page? It kind of doesn't give them a next step to take.
Mm-hmm. And, when somebody does apply for a position, we do set up informational interviews oftentimes with some of these companies. Part of it is part of the informational interview is, they really want to know a couple of things. They want to know, what are you passionate about? What was it that maybe and things like, what are you passionate about? And hopefully they can give you some thoughts on the role.
And just looking at time, maybe just skip to some of the more meaningful examples you had for some of the searching examples and the templates for reaching out, because I know those are really popular topics.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Perfect. Yeah. So let's go to move forward. All right. Okay. So finding and working with a mentor. Like I mentioned, how is a mentor different than general networking? So a mentor means building an ongoing relationship. Having a mentor means that you have an idea, that they have an idea of your work ethic and character. Typically, this is something that you build up to, is building up to getting to the point where you have a mentor through different types of interactions. Maybe it's more than one phone call, or having the opportunity to meet with them on different occasions. Mentoring relationships tend to have a more of a formalized meeting. You want to work with your mentor to determine how many times, annually, weekly, monthly, you'd like to meet, and then determine what items you'll cover in your meetings. So this is really what you're doing, is we are building a roadmap for your career, and then using them as a way to help give you advice on that. Choosing a good mentor is somebody who's going to be engaged and interested in your personal development. An engaged mentor works hard to give you the best advice. They do research on your behalf. There's nothing worse than having somebody who says that they are interested in helping you find what you're looking for, but then is really not as engaged in it as you would hope. But there are definitely opportunities for you to have more than one mentor. But just keep aware that if you have more than one mentor, you could spread yourself a little bit too thin as you have several meetings. Let's see. A mentor you want to choose a mentor that has a background you admire. Mentors can provide scope and background in your career field. And then I think this might have been mentioned a little bit earlier, but approaching a professional to be your mentor. The first part of it is making the invitation. And that can come through email, it can come over the phone, it can come face-to-face. We'll talk about building a reach out here in just a little bit. You want to be consistent but not overbearing until you get a response. If there's somebody that you really want to network with and to be your mentor, be consistent. Set up a time to meet, and be upfront with your goals, and advise the mentor how the relationship will benefit you, and hopefully they'll get on board with that. Another reason to be upfront with your goals is if they're not willing to put in the work, then having that upfront will allow you to look for another mentor without utilizing too much of your time with one particular person. And then, like I mentioned before, lay out your expectations. Okay. Let's talk about seeking contact information. I know we're somewhat short on time, so hopefully I can get through some of these more hands-on types of things, because I think this is really where a lot of the value is going to come from. Initial preparation. So you want to complete your LinkedIn profile, have an engaging tagline, well-defined experience, education, skills, projects, publications, and patents listed. These are all things that you can include on your LinkedIn profile. So let me show you an example. Okay, this is somebody that that I just put in a search for, who has some information. So Eugene is his name. He's in the Bay Area. This is the tagline. So this talks a lot about what he's currently doing, and then gives a very simplified overview in terms of his experience. So experience designing and implementing. And there's some keywords that as you look at profiles of people, look for things oftentimes with recruiters and engineers that are doing the hiring. They'll look at things like designing or implementing or building. For technical lead positions, they'll look at things like coaching or managing or leading. So adjectives definitely do matter, and so keep that in mind. So having a good tagline is, I think, pretty important. He didn't mention a lot about what his current job is. It looks like he's only been there 5 months, so he might be working on that. But he did share what he's done in his other positions. And if you notice, so he works at Google currently. And here's some of the keywords he put in his last role: proposed, designed, shipped. Kind of gives you an idea. He's been working end to end, or he's done some product management. Adapted, built, high performance. And when you think of some of these bigger companies like Google, they love seeing things like high performance, or up here you'll see functional programming. Distributed systems is what it seems like everybody's looking at. Modeling, machine learning, those are all keywords. A lot of like very current technology, Scala, Spark. Having some experience with Python. So a very complete profile. And then he goes into educations. I would definitely, if you have time, definitely think about the skills section and what you want to put in your skills section. Because again, when recruiters are looking for people for roles, they use keywords. And so when they put a keyword in the search box, if people have that in their skills section, it will show up. So just keep that in mind. And so he also has his projects and some of his publications. So really good example of a complete profile. And it definitely relates to what a lot of these companies like Google and Twitter and Amazon are looking for as well. Okay, so we talked about the initial preparation. Having a complete profile allows your profile to be seen more often. Okay, and next, how do we seek out individuals to network with? Okay, so there's a couple of things that we can do. We can do a Boolean search. So I put this Boolean search, oops. Okay. I put this Boolean search in LinkedIn, and I came up with several different profiles. So this is somebody that has a computer science degree. In terms of college that they may be graduated from, I put either Wuhan or Tsinghua. Software engineer, natural language processing, and manager. Okay. So what I came up with, and this is the candidate profile that I came across. Okay, so I came up with this person here, Tian Wang. So he's currently at Twitter. He's an engineering manager. So again, as you're thinking about what type of role you'd like to move into, think about, one, maybe you're looking for a software engineering job, but then also, are you looking to move into a manager job afterwards? So something to keep in mind. So you could put software engineer, you could put manager, and so you typically what happens is you'll find people with both this experience. So you can see at Twitter, he's went through different steps. And so if you have an informational interview or call with them, you can definitely ask about how they moved into these different positions and any advice that they would have for you. Okay, so there's a couple of different ways in which, if you wanted to reach out to Tian Wang and how you can try and connect with him and find his contact information. First thing you can do is you can connect with him, which most people who have a LinkedIn account understand this. Typically, what happens when you connect and they accept your connection request, you can then send them an email through LinkedIn, or once you're a connection with them, up here at the top it says contact and personal info, and they'll usually have their email address. Now I want to show you some tools if you haven't connected with them, and if you haven't connected with them, how you find their email address. So the first thing I'm going to show you is something called Pitfalls.com. Okay, and I'm just going to minimize this so that I can do some copy and pasting here. Okay, so we've got Pitfalls.com, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take his name. So Tian Wang in San Francisco. So he's in the Bay Area. Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to put his name in here. Then I'm going to go location. I'm going to do San Francisco. Hit the search. Okay. Let's see if this guy looks like him. So Tian Wang, 35 years old, senior staff, software engineer at Twitter. Okay, so this is definitely the person we're looking for. So I'm going to click on his name. Okay, and what I usually look at is right here. So you look at the usernames, and I'm going to go ahead and take this one right here. I'm going to copy, and I'm just going to put that in here. Type in Gmail. See if this is the one. Hit enter. Okay, and I've got a Tian Wang. So how do we know this is the right person? Well, I'm just going to click on their profile right here, and this is going to bring me to their Google Plus page. If I click on About, okay, we know he's a software engineer at Twitter. So this is definitely that Tian Wang. So now, going back here, we have his email address, and we can use this email address as we reach out to him. There's also another site called hunter.io, and this is what this is going to do. This is going to look up business addresses. So if I look up twitter.com and click on find email addresses, typically what you'll find is the email address is first and last name. Now, being at Twitter, I know this isn't always the case, but this gives you an idea, and this is definitely something you can look at as well to help you. Okay. Next thing we can do, we can just look at somebody in LinkedIn that has computer science, and I'll go ahead and put @gmail.com and is a software engineer. What I'll do is I'll click on this link right here. And I actually, to give you an idea, I actually came up with about 1,000 results, but I clicked on Jenny when I came up with results. And so she's a computer science major. She's a software engineer. She works currently at LinkedIn. She has her profile here. Now, if you remember, I did put @gmail.com. So if you look right here, all right, here is her email address. So if you want to reach out to her, you can reach out to her using her email address right there. Okay, awesome. Okay, another thing you can do is using something called Slideshare.net, and I'll just show you this really quick. There's something called the X-ray search. So basically, what that is, if you want to look at a particular site, you just do site, put in the website, and then information that you're looking for. So Slideshare, just so that you know, is whenever somebody on LinkedIn decides to download a resume, it will automatically go to Slideshare. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for people who have a computer science degree, that's a software engineer, and also have an engineering manager. And so if you notice, there's 109 results, and all of these people should contain, have computer science, computer science, they're a software engineer and also an engineering manager. And one of the nice things you can do here as well is it is actually their resume. And so typically you're going to have a phone number and you're going to have an email address right up there as well. All right. There's a few different things that we can do as well. We can look through alumni groups, very similar setup. We're running a little short on time, or else I'd really dig into some of these. You can look at meetup groups, you can look at conferences, you can look at lectures, and then these are just open web searches. So if you enter in this information in Google, you will be able to find things that not relate. And let me just show you this meetup groups really quick. So I think I already used the link right here. So again, the X-ray search, we're going to use meetup.com, natural language processing, San Francisco, and upcoming events. So when I click on this, this is going to bring me to Bay Area natural language processing. And then this has an upcoming event. So if you notice this event is going to be on October 12th at 6:00 p.m. So if you click on this, this is going to be all about voice-driven experiences with Neo4j and Amazon Alexa. You've got 46 people going. If you attend this event, this automatically opens up your networking to 46 new people that you can connect with. In addition, on several, there's a lot of times what will happen is you will have these meetups or lectures put on by a company, and typically those companies will have people from the recruiting team there. So they use those lectures or conferences oftentimes as a recruiting tool to help recruit new individuals. You can look at this a little bit later, but this is essentially just a networking matrix. We talked about based on what I had just searched for: alumni groups, meetup groups, LinkedIn, conferences, lectures. I talk about some of the pros and then also some of the cons regarding that. And I'll go ahead and move on.
Someone just asked us in the chat. We can share the PowerPoint slide afterward, because I know we're going fast through some of the pros and cons and details. We'll share the slides.
Okay.
And then one question that came up, how would you compare, this is a little bit outside of networking, but maybe more just how recruiters will interpret a profile. How do you compare a PhD new grad with an engineer who has a master's degree or undergrad but has a few years experience during the hiring process?
Good question. So PhDs, and it's based on the companies, I think they're a little bit different in terms of how they recruit PhDs. So I mean, it's kind of it's based really on the company. I can tell you when I was at Twitter, we looked at a lot of PhDs because we were looking for data scientists, and oftentimes we're looking at people who have a PhD degree. And And from there, it's a little bit different because oftentimes, when you just come out of a bachelor or even a master's program sometimes and don't have a lot of experience, you're oftentimes going to fall into maybe more of like a junior, maybe a mid-level engineer, whereas PhDs are kind of looked at a little bit different, I think, for the most part. And so they can go more into, just a straight industry or oftentimes senior level roles, senior level data scientists, for example. So yeah, they're looked at a little bit different. So good question.
And let's see here. Okay, if PhD, okay, so just one follow-up question on the PhD question while we're on that. If you quit your PhD and transitioned it into a master's degree, is it better to indicate that you were a PhD student or just list the master's?
I think there's value in definitely starting a PhD program. And if you think about PhDs, a lot of it kind of circles around kind of like the research aspect. And regardless of how much time you're there, it's one of those degrees where you typically look a little bit deeper into something, which I think holds a lot of value, and is able to look at things in all different sorts of ways. And so I would say if you have PhD, put it down there, because here's what's going to happen. If you start to interview, you will have to fill out an application. And if you fill out an application and you then decide to put your PhD program in, or even not, if they do a background check and your PhD program does show up, then that will definitely pose some questions. And so I think it's always best if you have had the experience to put it down.
Okay, great. And then last one we'll do before we move on. If this is going back to when you were showing all the methods of finding email addresses, someone asked, if we can't find the email address and reach out through LinkedIn InMail instead. And I would also include the notes that you can add when you connect to someone. So if people don't know this, if you have LinkedIn Premium, you can also add a note when you connect with someone. Is there anything they should be careful about when composing the InMail or note?
Yeah, so there's a little bit of a difference. So an InMail is having the premium account, which is, it's pretty expensive, honestly, to do it that way. You can. If you really want to, you're definitely open to it. But when you connect with somebody, what it has now is you can actually create a personal message that is 300 characters long, which really isn't that long. And I think I actually put that in my notes as well. But we did breeze through that. And so you could write a quick note. If just letting someone know that you'd love to connect with them, and maybe doing a quick personal note to them. And sorry, I lost, what was the last part of that question?
Just like, is there anything careful? I think they're just asking, how do you go about, is there any structure you would give to how you write those messages? Maybe it's a good time to just open the examples you have of networking messages.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, definitely.
Because I think the text is similar, right? The cold email and a cold InMail are kind of similar text, right?
Yeah, they're similar. Yeah, and in fact, some of these examples actually came through LinkedIn. So, I'll just share this with you. So, in the informational interview, when you're setting up a reach out email, personal approach, highlight things like skill set, explain your interest in knowing more, set a timeline for conversation. So I always like to highlight when you're reaching out to somebody, always invite. And I think that's key in being able to really establish a good contact. So I just want to go over a couple things here. So this is what I consider a good example of a reach out. You're welcome to look a little bit more in depth into this a little bit later. But what I really like about this, and I'll just go ahead and just share this really quick, because it's just a minute or so. See, thank you for connecting with me on LinkedIn. It's great to find a fellow computer science alum from Carnegie Mellon, or insert whichever college or whichever particular thing you have in common. In coming across your profile, I noticed you have been working on Twitter's deep learning platform, Cortex.
Sorry, could you just zoom in a little bit? The text was a little small.
Yeah.
Yeah, much better. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Okay, in coming across your profile, I noticed you have been working on Twitter's deep learning platform, Cortex. What's nice about this is it does show you have some familiarity with the project that they're working on. Mentions the company. I don't know how many emails I've received where it's very general. They don't mention the company, so I'm not sure if they're curious about the current company I'm working with, or if it's just a blanket email that they send out. I have 3 years experience working in a machine learning environment. I like about that because it mentions the number of years of working with the technology, and if you remember, 3 to 5 years is typically what you consider kind of like your mid-level engineer, but insert any number you'd like in there. But I'm trying to figure out how I can take my experience to the next level. I'd love to chat with you over the phone for a few minutes and see if I can ask you some questions about how you got into your current role. Okay, so here's where it's digging into the specific question. And any ideas that may help me in building my career path. Okay, so right here, you kind of recognize their expertise, which people hold a lot of value in, and people love giving advice, and so a really good question about how they could provide expertise and give you some advice. Do you have 10 to 15 minutes later on this week for a short chat? A pretty open schedule. If you want to suggest a time, I can make myself available. I like to keep the time frame pretty short, because you definitely want to value people's time. You can start off at 10 to 15 minutes, and typically what I'll do on occasion is once you kind of hit that 15-minute mark or get close to it, you can say, I've got a couple more questions. If you have some time, I can ask you. Otherwise, I can email, or maybe what we can do is set up another call later on. So that way what you're doing is you're continuing the conversation and continuing to build your rapport with this person. Now, just keep in mind, not everybody is going to respond to you, but as you continue to network and find more people to network with, you will start to get people responding back to you, and you'll start to build that network. I don't know if we have time to go over the bad example, and it's pretty self-explanatory. I mean, you'll see I've got some notes associated with that. I've got something here where if you're curious what kind of questions you'd like to you want to ask in an informational interview, you can click on preparing questions for the call, and I think there's a list of about 75 different questions you can ask. So use that as more of kind of like a template, and then come up with your own as well that relates to your background and what you're looking to gain. So definitely have a purpose for the call and the interview. Take notes, organize your notes. Definitely thank them, invite them to follow up, and then just to finish off, I have an elevator pitch here, and I'm not sure, Mike. How much time do I have?
You can go a few minutes over. It's okay. Okay. I think people do want to see examples of the actual examples of the elevator pitch.
Okay, perfect. So your elevator pitch is, again, that 20 to 30 second long presentation highlighting yourself and your experience. When you can use an elevator pitch in meetups, when you're at conferences. Remember we talked about that conference. If you attend the conference, there's 46 people there. Good opportunity to be able to share your experience with people. If you go to lectures and you speak with recruiters, definitely a good place to share your elevator pitch. Okay, so process of an elevator pitch. I'll just share this really quick step by step. Speak to your environment. where you are at will play a lot into your presentation. Oftentimes you may have to adapt your pitch a little bit, maybe keep it short depending on where you're at. Okay, looking for a cue. Example, tell me about yourself, or what do you do? Perfect time to insert your elevator pitch. Learn your pitch. If you can memorize it, great. That will also help you in terms of adapting to the situation. Follow-up questions. So some of the follow-up questions are you aware of any opportunities that may match my background? So after you're able to share the elevator pitch, you can ask questions such as this. Or do you know anyone that may be able to help me find an opportunity that matches my background? So I think we talked about in the informational interview, this may not be appropriate, but the elevator pitch I think is a little bit different. But again, play to your background and your environment, and determine for yourself if it seems like a good place where you can ask those sort of questions. Let me share the example that I really liked in terms of an elevator pitch. So this is somebody who is a software development. I thought I actually had notes here. Oh, there you go. Okay, perfect. Okay. So first they highlight what they're currently doing. So they're a software developer, and their current team. And I like that because people often try to understand where you will fit the best based on what you're currently doing. So software developer and current team focuses on customizing software for financial institutions nationwide. Gives you an idea of what the industry is there. I have 3 years of experience, again highlighting years of experience, developing software using C#, MS SQL, and web technologies such as HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. Again, if you're talking to someone who's a recruiter or that has a particular need for a particular technology, sometimes it's important to be able to share some of the things that you're currently working with and the technologies you're working with. I've had experience in both the development side and sales side of software. I understand how to deal with clients and to deliver high quality products on a timely schedule. I also have experience in all phases of product development, from planning and requirement gathering to implementing and testing. Okay, and what I was able to gather from experience in all phases of product development is oftentimes it's a bonus if you have experience working end-to-end or working on particular areas that people are looking to hire. So if your experience maybe isn't in all phases of product development, maybe it's in working with back-end technologies or working on responsive websites on the front end, things like that, you can insert something like that. I have knowledge of the processes behind deploying enterprise class software using the SaaS model. For personal projects, I have created several apps for mobile platforms such as Android and iOS, which focused on intuitive user interfaces and rich user experience. People often like to see what you're passionate about, and so adding a personal project does hold a little bit of weight. I'm currently looking for a position that will allow me to create new software and apps with my innovative ideas. So be upfront in terms of what you're looking for. I would like to use my experience to produce creative software that is competitive in the market and would benefit the organization. So that's obviously what I would consider a good example of an elevator pitch. And then just to show you real quick, an example which is a little bit different. This is actually what I consider maybe not as good of a pitch. Hi, my name is Chad. I'm sorry to bother you via LinkedIn messages, but since you work for Twitter, I was hoping you could help me with obtaining a job with Twitter. This kind of just throws out a blanket statement. It's very generalized. It doesn't give me the impression that they're that they're looking for, that they're reaching out to any particular person. And so it doesn't matter if you work in customer service, engineering, which if you're looking for an engineering job, you want to make sure that you're reaching out to the right people, and you've done some research on that end. I have for multiple months now, since January of this year, applied for an engineering opportunity, but have failed on each attempt. I'm not sure what exactly I'm doing wrong, but I feel that I deserve the mark. I've been a very iconic person here in Japan for my work in the Let's Stream Kansai project. Okay, so the first part talked about how they failed and not exactly what they're doing wrong. So one, doesn't recognize that they have that there are some particular challenges that they can't solve, and have noticed that they have failed on each attempt, but are not realizing what they're doing, and doesn't seem like they're putting in the work to understand where they are failing. The Let's Stream Kansai project, it's unfamiliar, so when you're reaching out to somebody with an unfamiliar project, it's a little hard to know what direction to set them in. Twitter is a very important tool in my day-to-day life as an engineer. Notice the grammar problem there. Having the verified mark of Twitter will be a great blessing. I look forward to hearing back from you. And if you notice, there's no invitation here, and so I'm not really sure how they'd like me to help them. So, great. Well, so that's the elevator pitch. That's a good example, bad example. You can also look at a bad example in terms of informational interview on the following slide. And that's it. I know I went a little bit over. I don't know if there are any questions at all. I've got a little bit of time, but definitely if it's based on whatever schedule works for you all.
Yeah, no, first of all, yeah, thank you for all that. And to people that were asking, we can share the slides and the video afterwards. So if there's some details we went through quickly, no problem. We'll have a chance to look back. There are a few questions, and if we do have time, as long as you have time, Rob, to stay on for a few more minutes, we can answer what we have left in the queue here. So first one left is, if you switch your career path from something like a product engineer to a software SDE, I'm assuming software development engineer, how would you build up your LinkedIn profile? And I think you could answer this more generally. If you're making a switch between two different technical roles, how would that impact how you update your LinkedIn profile?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I mentioned was just the tagline at the top. I think I've actually come across somebody who had a similar profile. So I think they had done product management, moved into an SDE or vice versa. And so one of the things that just automatically came to mind is, what are they looking to do, or what's their next move? And so that tagline at the top is where you can put information about what you're looking to do. And so if you notice also in that good example of the elevator pitch, if you remember that I mentioned that they have experience in these different areas, but what they're looking to do is move into something on the mobile side. So very similar. If you're looking for something more SDE related, you can put that in the tagline, or more product management related, you can also put that in the tagline as well.
Got it. So this, let me see here. Okay, so I have a master's degree and I want to do data science. I think this is coming back from when you were talking about the PhD approaching data science. If they have a master's degree, is it better to go after something like data analytics or data analyst first rather than the job title of data scientist?
Not necessarily. A lot of it kind of is based on your experience. I mean, if you're just experience, or I would also say projects that you've done, maybe in your program, maybe if you've done some solid internships. And one thing to keep in mind too is that when you're looking at positions, it's not a blanket black and white with every company. Every company will vary a little bit in terms of what they're looking for. I know with Twitter, they really liked PhDs for data scientists, but I also know that they also looked at people who had a master's program, and even some people who just had a bachelor's degree as well that they looked at. Not necessarily, but At the same time, I know that with a few companies that I worked in, a data analyst sometimes will feed into a data scientist role. And there are quite a bit of similarities, and you work cohesively side by side. Yeah, it really just depends on what company, because some companies will kind of combine the two as well. So it's also something to think about.
A couple other questions just coming in at the end here. I think this is a really interesting one. So when I'm looking for jobs on LinkedIn, is it helpful to send an email or a note to the job poster? So I'm assuming a recruiter that's related to the job post, saying that you're really passionate about the position. They say they've done this a lot, but they've only gotten a few replies.
So I can speak by personal experience that I've actually done it when I've looked at LinkedIn for opportunities, and I think it's and I think it is, there's some value add in that. And and just to kind of give you an idea, and sometimes you'll see this. So LinkedIn has a job section, and sometimes on that job section, sometimes it'll be posted and sometimes it won't, but it'll say who is the person that posted the position, and so you can reach out to that person directly. Now it could be a couple of different things, maybe in terms of why or why not you got a response from that person. And I would look just to make sure that in terms of what they're looking for matched up with your experience. That might be one reason. But with that being said, even though that person is the job poster, you can also reach out to somebody else within the company. For example, typically it's a recruiter that's posting those jobs, and so you could also look for a recruiter at that company, and then reach out to them and then maybe send them a link and say, I'm really interested in this opportunity. Can you put me in touch with the right person? So it's sometimes, honestly, it's a matter of who you talk to. And yeah, I wish it was more uniform. Sometimes there's recruiters that are a little bit more active, and sometimes there's some that aren't as active and not as open to helping in that aspect.
Okay, great. I'm looking here. Some are coming in the chat box as well. Oh, this is an interesting one, tricky. I'm not even sure companies are allowed to do this, but it must have come up if they're asking. But they're saying, for the application process in the racial info field, should we say Asian or do not want to provide the information, or does it not matter? And the same question for gender.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter. So the only thing that they use that information for, they don't use that any hiring decisions. The only reason that they use that, so you'll see on occasion, Google will come out with these reports, or Facebook will come out with these reports, and they'll say, this is what the demographic of our company looks like. And I think they get that just from that question. So if you get hired, they'll have that information there, but it's definitely not anything that's going to impede your application. I've never looked at it. I don't know anybody else who's looked at it when making a hiring decision or choosing to interview any particular person.
Yeah, in the U.S., I'm pretty sure it's illegal to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, as companies, and you'll see this a lot, is, there are particular groups that companies do target on occasion. In terms of, like, for example, well, they'll look at some groups. So I guess you kind of touched on this. So one of the groups that they'll look at is gender, but they won't use that as for a place to look. They might look at, like, your LinkedIn profile. They'll look at your name maybe, and then use that as a way to reach out. So. Yep.
Okay, a couple more here. So this is phrased kind of short, but I think it can go deeper. Is, how do you see people with a career gap? So if you see they maybe took a year or two off between jobs, how do you view that?
Yeah, I've had this come up several times. I What I like to see is what are they doing in their gap, regardless, what it is. I think people just like to see some activity. Oftentimes what will happen is you'll have somebody who's had some really good experience, but then they've kind of dropped off and then they've come back in. And one of the reasons that they dropped off might be something like they had a child, for example, and so they took some time off to be with their family, which, I mean, is totally fine. But I guess when you're thinking about these type of roles, people want to make sure that you're still technically sound, in terms of like software engineering, for example. And they honestly, I don't know if it matters quite as much. You could put something like took a sabbatical, but as long as you could put something there, but honestly, if as long as you can explain it or somewhat explain it, maybe put some of the personal projects you worked on while you're taking that time off. I think that should be sufficient.
Got it. Yeah, and I think it's just kind of practicing that answer too. Is just, it takes a little bit of rehearsal, and that's something I'd prepare, just like I'd prepare for the common behavioral questions. I'd have your sort of career gap elevator pitch before even going into the interview.
Mm-hmm. And, one of the things that might be a really good reason for you to network with somebody as well, if you do feel like the gap in your resume, your profile is keeping you from getting a job, then maybe you should have informational interviews that and just build on your networking, and then like you said, Mike, use your elevator pitch to be able to present yourself and maybe go at it a different way than just applying straight out.
Yep. Okay, there were quite a few that came in at the end, so I'm just going to have to pick a couple just in the interest of time. Sorry, everyone, if we don't get to all of your questions. So Rick Lee posted this one a little bit earlier when you were showing the example of a really good LinkedIn profile. Mm-hmm. He's saying, how do you know if he's talking big, which I interpret as, how do you know that he's not just putting every keyword on his LinkedIn profile without having those real skills? Yeah,
and you know what? I mean, honestly, sometimes you don't know. Sometimes that might be a good way to to get a conversation with the recruiter, honestly. And that's but one thing that you do want to probably prevent doing, and I've seen this happen quite a bit, is you'll have somebody who will put every single technology that they've ever learned about or have done on their profile. And that's just overwhelming, because the first thing you think about is, okay, they've done just about everything, but what direction are they wanting to take their career? Or are they going to have enough experience in this particular area to be effective as an engineer with this company?
Yep. Okay. How do you fit 5 years of experience into a one-page resume? Well, first off, should you keep it to my opinion is yes, you should keep it to a one-page resume. So that's the first question. And then if you do keep it to that, how would you consolidate?
So is that 5 years with several positions, or?
It just said 5 years of experience, 5, 6. Okay, so there was a follow-up. So how to include 5 to 6 years job experience with detailed information on education.
Oh, like if they want to put a patent or something like that?
Yeah, I'm not. We might get another answer in the chat. So follow up. If you're still on, this was from Lawrence Wong. If you want to clarify, right now we'll answer according to 5 to 6 years work experience.
Yeah, and so if you want to put 5 years work experience, I think that should be able to fit on a one-page resume without any problem. I think the second part of the question, and I've seen this happen quite a bit as well, is typically if people have written lots of publications or they have several patents, how do you condense that into one page? And I mean, with those, I could say, you could probably go into 2 pages, honestly. But you could also shorten it and put, links to the talks, or maybe to your LinkedIn profile. One thing to keep in mind too is I don't know if people are as concerned. If you have several publications that are very similar in scope in terms of what you've worked on or things you've written about, I don't think you need to put every publication, but maybe highlight a couple, 2 or 3 that you can put in there, and then they can look at that as a.
I did get some follow up here. So it was 5 to 6 jobs. So how do you fit 5 to 6 jobs in one page?
Yeah. Well, ironically enough, I actually have 5 to 6 jobs on my page as well. I would say you could do things like adjusting the margins would be one thing you can do. Break it down into bullet points and cover a few different things in those bullet points. If what I've seen people do in the past is if they have done, like, for example, like contracts so they contract with a particular agency, but then they've worked at different positions, they'll put the company that they work with, like, for example, like Infosys is really popular. And then they might write bullet points in terms of what they've done over the course of working there. I always like to see job titles. I like to see companies, and I think that tells you a little bit about their career progression as well. I'd say there's ways you can add. You can put 5 to 6. I mean, I'd be happy to share my resume with you if you want to have an example.
Okay. Oh, sorry. I thought you were going into a screen share with your resume.
Oh, no.
No problem. Okay. Okay. All right, guys. I apologize. I know I see a bunch coming in, but he's on the East Coast, so I want to wrap up. So we're going to do our last one here. Let's see here. Operations for 2 years. Okay. Okay, this is an interesting one. I'm going to pick this one, guys, just because it's closest to the topic of networking. If I have a target company, but they do not have an ideal position post yet that matches your experience, if I want to start networking with someone in the company, do you think I should network with HR or directly with the manager? Assuming it's the manager of a team that might in the future have a post that's relevant to you.
I would say to network with the manager, and not the HR manager, but somebody who is on the technical side of things, because there is where you're going to build that relationship, hopefully, and over time as you're building that rapport. One thing that holds a lot of weight in almost every company that I've worked with is employee referrals, and that is where you actually will see the most hires is through those referrals. And so I would build with the team members, and then when something does come up, they can submit you as their referral, and oftentimes that's going to hold more weight. And oftentimes recruiters, they'll move on to different positions as they fill different roles, and they might move into a different group where they're not working with a particular role anymore. But you can always set yourself a calendar reminder to circle back with them afterwards, or you circle back with somebody, with a recruiter, and that might be a way just to follow up from time to time.
Yep. Great. Okay, I know I'm cheating. Just one more because I know a lot of people ask about this. And I also just released the exit poll. So before you guys log off, please answer those questions. I really appreciate it. This is kind of a question. I don't know if it's possible, and I know some recruiters don't do it, possibly for liability reasons, but how do you feel about giving feedback to people, especially if they don't make it through the interview or they don't get the offer? So I know a lot of people, they're really desperate to get the feedback. They just want to know what they did wrong. They're not angry necessarily. They just want to do better the next time. Is there any way to reach out to recruiters to get meaningful feedback after an interview where the offer is not extended?
You know what? That's actually a major pain point, I think, for a lot of recruiters as well, because I think as recruiters, we want to be able to give information about what went wrong, or what went wrong, but what maybe was the factor that didn't help them to move to the next step. But there are some legality concerns there that kind of prevent us from digging into that. Plus, I think a lot of times too, as a recruiter, there's some like technical questions that maybe you didn't meet the technical bar in one way or another, and so as a recruiter, as you try to explain that, I don't know if it is conveyed in the best way. What I would recommend, honestly, and is actually to find the contact information for the engineer that you've met with, and then just reach out to them and ask them if there's maybe if there's one or two things you could do better next time. What would they recommend? And I think there's a couple of reasons why I think that might be a better route. I think one with engineers, they can speak a little bit more in depth about the technical aspect, but then two, sometimes they're not as well versed in kind of like the HR pieces and some of the legalities surrounding that, and so they're a little bit more open to share that information. More from ignorance, I think, than than anything. So.
Okay, great. Well, I apologize, guys. We can't get through all of them. It's quite late now on the East Coast, but we will share the materials after the class, including the PowerPoint and the video. The video recording will come up a little bit later than the PowerPoint. Thank you all for attending. Please finish the exit poll before you leave. And yeah, really appreciate everyone coming. And thank you, Rob, for speaking.
All right, no problem. Thank you.
All right. I'm just going to mute myself, but I'll leave the poll open for a few more minutes. And feel free to drop off whenever, Rob.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Good night, everyone.